Greetings. Welcome to episode 156 of Bible 180. 180 episodes between Genesis and Revelation. Today we're on Romans 8:28, an incredibly wonderful verse. But before we get to that, I want to just talk to you a little bit about, what good would the internet be if it weren't for urban legends? I mean, urban legends that we keep getting and seeing on Instagram or Facebook, we forward it to people we know, because then the other person might know something that's making the rounds. Like if you fall asleep on a beach in Mexico, some people will come and make you breathe in some kind of pixie dust that will put you in a coma, and then they'll steal your kidney. Or that you can quickly reduce your cell phone, recharge your cell phone by putting it in a microwave for 60 seconds. Or you can, baby carrots come, from deformed full carrots that have been soaked in chlorine. Or there's poisonous two-striped spiders that are lurking behind toilet seats in public restrooms. I mean, they're all online, so they have to be true, right? Well, no. Actually, none of those are true. Misinformation, conspiracy stuff that you can find online, and you have to be careful with what you read, because otherwise, you'll simply believe things that are not true, that are factually inaccurate, and you need to have a brain to be able to figure out those things which are true and those things that are not true. It's not just urban legends that tell us things that are not true, but there's also things which are, I think, damaging or spiritual damaging. I like to think of them as spiritual urban legends. Spiritual urban legends are things that we kind of believe that are true, that are in the Bible, but they really aren't. Spiritual urban legends can be just as damaging, or sometimes even more, because when we believe spiritual legends and we think, oh, they're in a good book, but they're actually not, then our hearts and minds can be filled with messages that beat us down and draw us away from knowing a loving God. Let your conscience be your guide. Well, no, the Bible doesn't say let your conscience be your guide. The Bible tells us our conscience is very screwed up and sinful. If we follow our conscience, it'll bring us into bad places again and again. Let your conscience be your guide actually was said by Jiminy Cricket. So you can follow Jiminy Cricket or you can follow Jesus. I think that choice is very clear. One other of many spiritual legends is the phrase, well, everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. That's a spiritual legend that is pervasive and persistent. It usually comes in the midst of a difficult time of loss or divorce or physical violence, when we don't know what to say. We think to ourselves, God must be up to something. God doesn't make mistake. Look what's happening as a blessing in disguise, because everything happens for a reason. Now, in some sense, it's true that no matter what happens, God is ultimately in control. God is King of the universe, all powerful, almighty, all good, all kind, all just. That's a larger picture. The whole creation is working toward redemption in Jesus Christ. One day he will return for the final judgment at the end of time, when God will be the one who separates the sheep and the goats. In a larger, ultimate picture, yes, God is king and ruler of the universe, but that doesn't mean that God is a direct cause of everything that happens. It doesn't mean there's a reason for everything. It doesn't mean that everything that happens is because God wants it to happen. It doesn't mean that everything that happens is God's will, and that we just can't know the reason for something. So it means we just have to believe that everything happens for a reason, because that's just not true. God did not cause Adam and Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. God did not cause the mighty King David to sexually abuse a young, powerless Bathsheba. God did not cause the Tower of Babel to be built. God did not cause the crowd to cry out for Barabbas to be released rather than Jesus. God did not cause the Roman soldiers to kill Jesus. Those who carried out those evil deeds bear responsibility for their actions. They can't blame God as if God planned it and God forced them to do those things because it was a part of God's plan all along. God does not cause suffering and death and disease and pandemics, and those things do not happen for any good reason. So when we think everything happens for a reason, why is that a persistent spiritual urban legend? Well, I think there might be two reasons. One is that we desperately want things to make sense. We want God to be in control of everything that happens. We project our human need for an orderly universe on God without realizing that it's our own human need and not something that's in the Bible. So when things happen that seem to be without explanation or reason, we think to ourselves, there has to be a reason because we have a human need for an orderly universe, that everything must happen for a reason. We project our need for things to make sense into a picture of a God who is strong and all-knowing and powerful. It's our human need to make sense of things when things don't make sense, that somehow there must be a reason, when sometimes there's no reason at all. Sometimes life just happens and there's no reason, no understanding, no explaining away when a catastrophe happens. Second reason, I think, comes from a misreading or a misunderstanding of the verse that we have today, Romans 8:28, which says, we know that all things are working toward good for those who love God, who are called according to God's people. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. Everything happens for a reason. All things will be good. If you're doing your part and things aren't going well, that must mean God must not be doing his part, right? Everything happens for a reason. So you have to scream, what's the reason, God, we project our need for an orderly universe onto God? The Bible does not say all things will be good. The Bible says all things, Romans 8:28, all things work together for good. Not will be good, but work together for good. All things will be good are something we want in the short term. We just want short term. We want results. We want things to be good right now, but all things work together for good is having a longer term vision or insight that comes from knowing that the challenges of life that we navigate are nothing compared to the long-term vision of what God is promising for those who love God. All things work together for good for those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. And like I said in the last episode, in the last 5-8 years, many people who are listening might have gone through a major life crisis, or maybe going through one right now, or if you haven't, you probably will in the next 5-8 years. That's just the way life works. It is the way reality comes to us. But the older you get, not speaking of myself getting older, but the older you get, the one thing you know is that life is tough. Life is hard. Life is challenging. Ain't nothing works out perfectly. Your body doesn't work perfectly if you get older. The weather doesn't always work perfectly. The economy, relationships don't always work perfectly. The older you get, the more you know that life is full of losses. And the older you get, the more you accumulate defeats and disappointments and losses, the more sorrows and sufferings and problems and pressures, defeats and disappointments you accumulate. And I don't know what you're going through right now, but I hope life is going well for you. But I know that many people live life with a churning hearts, with conflicts and chaos. maybe a bad health report, maybe in the midst of a fight with your husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or close friend, maybe grieving that money isn't there when you need it and you're under tension, maybe the death of a loved one or a loss and you're feeling alone and empty inside. What do you do with that? Well, maybe two things. First, realize we live in a broken world. Like it or not, we live in a broken, sinful world surrounded by consequences of original sin nature that we've talked about before. And as Forrest Gump said years ago, things happen. Life happens when we're surrounded by broken, sinful people who sometimes make the wrong choices that affect us. We're broken and we're hurting and we face challenges, and that's why it's important not to let your conscience be your guide, as Jiminy Cricket would tell you. But second, when you're tempted to say everything happens for a reason to someone else in the midst of a tragedy or difficult time or death or loss or divorce, don't. Just don't. Instead, do with them what Jesus did. What he did, like we talked about a number of episodes ago, he wept. Jesus wept. Jesus went to the tomb of Lazarus, who had just died. Lazarus and his sisters, Mary and Martha, were good friends of Jesus. And when Lazarus died, Jesus didn't say, everything happens for a reason. He didn't say, always look on the bright side of life. He wept. He stood there and wept with tears streaming down his face. He was angry and upset because death is a bad thing. It isn't a blessing in disguise. It's not a cloud with a silver lining. Jesus hates death. Jesus hates alienation, loneliness, pain, suffering, and abuse. And he hates it so much that he was willing to come into the world and experience with all that life has to offer, so eventually he could destroy death without having death destroy us. Weep. When you have a friend or family member going through a difficult time, our human nature is to try to explain it away or rationalize it or say everything happens for a reason. Don't do that. Instead, weep with them. Allow yourself to enter into the pain and suffering of another person and feel their pain, and give them permission to hurt about what's happening in their life. Rather than trying to fix things or cheer people up, weep with them. The best thing to do is to feel their pain and assure them that God does too. Don't give a soundbite answer to a complex question of why things happen. Just know that God's will and reign will not be taken away. And when someone experiences loss, choose your Hallmark cards wisely. Some of the worst theology I've seen is inside of Hallmark cards because they attempt to resolve a person's deep grief with something piously religious, but in reality is trivial and trite. Years ago, after the funeral of a 4-month-old child who died of a bad heart valve, the young mom walked into my office, threw a Hallmark card down on my desk, and she said, "Is this true?" She was angry. And on the front of the card, it said, "I'm sorry for your loss." And on the inside, it said, "God must have wanted another angel in heaven." And she said, if that's true, that God took my baby because God wanted another angel in heaven, then to hell with God. And she was right. God does not take away children from their mothers because God wanted another angel in heaven. Choose your Hallmark cards wisely. Allow yourself to enter into the pain and suffering of another person. Feel their pain. Weep with them. Give yourself permission to feel their hurt and what's happening in their lives. The best thing you can do is assure them that you feel their pain and God does too. Again, don't give a soundbite answer to resolve a complex question of why things happen. Weep with them, but don't try to take away the pain and grief and anguish. We know that all things work for good for those who love God and who are called according to his purposes. When bad things happen, don't just say, everything happens for a reason. Instead, love God more. Get closer to God. Get to know God more, and God will reveal to you eventually the calling and the purpose for you and your life. God says, Paul says, all things work together for good for those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. So love God more. Your purpose will be revealed more and more, and instead you'll know Jesus more, who suffered, so that when you suffer, you'll become more like him. And when you don't understand things, that's the time to get closer to God, closer every day and in every way. So remember to be grateful. Remember to be grateful and live and lean in toward God's love for you. You take good care. Bye-bye.